So let's talk about the next chapter, which is about proxy. When you hear the word proxy, what comes to your mind? What does proxy, what does it mean?
Do something for someone else.
Okay, yeah, to do something for someone else. Yep. So like maybe a proxy in terms of a health agent or a legal agent, doing something by proxy. Have you ever used a proxy with a computer? Okay, what did you do, Steve, with a proxy?
We use that to filter out web access between our internal network and outside.
Okay, so filter out the access. Do you recall if it's a forward proxy or reverse proxy?
It was forward one.
Yeah, yeah.
We've also dealt with reverse proxies, but haven't didn't understand what that actually did.
Okay, so today we'll try to figure out which ones are the forward proxy, which ones are reverse proxies. But yes, we are going to do certain work for someone else. So proxy is a module in Apache that can be used for this purpose, but there are other software pieces that do just that. Okay, let's start our discussion with a forward proxy. Okay. In a forward proxy, a good product that's open source that does it is called the Squid. Okay? Forward proxy allows you to set up a server and then have that server share internet with other computers. Okay? So in the library, for example, you may have a lab of 10 computers, but only one has access to the internet. So on that computer that has the cable modem plugged in, you can run Apache with a proxy module on it, and all the other browsers on that local network at the library can connect to the internet through it. And that's done by configuring the browser. If I'm sure you've seen this before, under Tools, Options, you go to Network, go to Settings, and this is where you configure the proxy. You can just say, let's see, manual proxy, and you type in the IP address, okay, some kind of IP address, and you can type in the port where the Apache is running. And so then, even though my network configuration, my network gateway even, may not be resolving any external addresses, okay, as long as I have DNS available to me, I can use the internet through this proxy. Now the great thing on the proxy end is, number one, you can log everything that's happening. So now when people are going out to different websites, you log that. The second thing that you can do is you can limit access to websites, okay, and sometimes you can even specify, well, for this local website, do not even use the proxy, and so then you would allow the system to go directly to the site. So you can, in the browser, you can proxy across different protocols on a different server. So if you have an FTP proxy set up somewhere else, you can send those requests to an external system. We are going to look at the HTTP proxy, and also we could do the SSL proxy with Apache. Okay, proxying SSL is a little bit more difficult because obviously this is an encrypted conversation. It's an encrypted conversation, but it's doable, and especially with a reverse proxy, we'll talk about that. So this forward proxy has many uses, but today, okay, at home, you have multiple devices, maybe on a wireless access point, and you do not have to use proxy. And the reason why is because your wireless device creates a local area network, and your network is connected through the access point. So any address that you ping or you try to access via HTTP or FTP, you can, through the default gateway, you can access right directly at the network level. Okay, But again, especially maybe in elementary schools where it's the law, you have to monitor and you have to control the access. These forward proxies are very commonly used. Okay, so here's how we would do that in Apache. In Apache, we would install the system just like we did before. And here's an example of an installed system. And we would use the proxy by configuring it in httpd.conf. Before I do that, let's verify that proxy is actually enabled. Okay, so is this module even enabled? Well, let's take a look. We do that by running httpd-l. When you run this command, the httpd daemon is going to output all the modules that it has pre-configured, or all the ones that are already compiled inside of it. And so let's see, we have mod SO, which allows us to add dynamically new modules. We have mod alias, user directory, actions, CGI auto index status, mod status, by the way, is what we used last week when we enabled it. There is pre-fork env, so proxy is not here, right? So what we will need to do is we'll need to recompile with proxy and then install. Okay, to do that, for simplicity, I'm actually going to uninstall my Apache server. But you don't have to do that. You can just configure and then make install, and it's going to put everything back in its place correctly. Let's make sure and see if Apache is running. So Apache is running. First, I'm going to shut it down. Stop. All right, now that it's shut down, I'm going to uninstall it. And by uninstalling, I just mean remove the directory. I could have specified in the source directory, make uninstall, and it would go and do a similar action. So I'll remove it. So this takes us back to our first lab where we say prefix equals home napix Apache. Now the next command here, and it's all on one line, okay? So even though my screen is going to put me on the second line, it's all one command. And then I'll say with port 8080, and I think this is exactly what we've done last time with port 8080. And now I will say enable proxy, okay? So the keyword enable says go in your source files, find the proxy module, and when I issue make install, you got to be ready, and those sources need to be included on the list. Next time when we do SSL, we will say enable-SSL. If you would like to have another module, you just say --enable- and then the name of the module. So we'll go ahead and issue this command. All right. So this is going to do that for a little bit. At this point, I'm going to go back to Blackboard and let's see. Let me go back to assignments. There it is. Okay, so currently we are on this step right here where we will say enable proxy and then make install. The actual configuration of our forward proxy is going to be rather simple. We'll just say enable proxy requests on. Then we'll say proxy via on, and then we have the option of saying whether to proxy for local domains or not. The last part is optional. So the configuration itself for proxy is very simple. The important part is the understanding what's happening, and this is what's going to happen. Okay, if this is the workstation which creates a request, and this workstation wishes to go to www.google.com. Okay, this workstation makes a request at the network level, and it will not be able to go outside of the firewall. Port 80 on that firewall is closed for this workstation. Okay, the idea is everybody is going to just stay inside. So, as part of the forward proxy, okay, we're going to use now our Apache proxy. To use it correctly, we have to specify in the browser where it is located. So you have to provide the IP address, and you have to provide the port number of where the proxy is located. And when we then reach the server, okay, so here's the server, the actual Google server. Okay, the server will not be able to tell our local IP address. We likely have a local IP address of 192.168 with some change, or we just have localhost on 127.0.0.1. Okay, but when we are connecting to our proxy system, so the one that's in the middle, okay, the server, google.com, will actually see the IP of the proxy server as the one accessing. Which is why, when everybody at the library is looking at different web pages, they all look like the same workstation to the server. Okay? So we are going to hide the local IP addresses, and the server suddenly will see the same IP. But you can still go to Amazon.com and use the credit card to make purchases. Now, how does that happen? Why does that happen? What technology is used to identify your browser when you log in to some website? So the IP address is it's all the same because it's based on the proxy. Okay, it's cookies. Yeah. So when all the systems look like the same IP address because you're connecting through this proxy, it's the same exact thing as if someone was sitting on that Apache proxy server and they were browsing the internet. The difference is that when your browser goes out, makes a connection, and makes an HTTP request, that HTTP request comes back with a cookie. And that cookie gets written on your browser and not any other browsers in the library. And then the Apache proxy, its task is to send the right request with the response back to the right workstation. So it tracks who connected and now connected back, because it now knows your local IP addresses, so it can track it that way. Okay, so it's very interesting that because of cookies, we can use to full extent the browsers that are behind a forward proxy. Okay, and so that's the forward proxy. It's when forward proxy. That's when we have a workstation, and the workstation goes through a middle server that is going to give us access to the internet, and then Google itself is going to see the IP address of the proxy. Okay, so now we'll say make and make install. And so then that works nicely. Okay. All right, so let's now take a closer look at the configuration part. I'll go ahead and edit the Apache config file. Let's verify that under the listen directive we have port 8080. That's great. I'm going to go right to the bottom of the file, okay, because my virtual hosts are commented out. We'll go ahead and do the configuration at the bottom. Okay. So let me bring back the lab here. Bring this back, and here we'll say go ahead and proxy requests on then proxy via on. Okay, with just those two settings, I can save the file and I can start the server. So Apache bin Apache CTL start. Now if I was to go to iceweasel and say, okay, localhost 8080, right? This is my home page. But the key is that I can go to tools, tools or preferences somewhere here. Let's see where the weasel moved it. Preferences, there we go. Preferences, main. It's always somewhere close by. Let's see, maybe advanced, network, settings. All right, so I can say manual proxy and use localhost port 8080. And then I'll say OK, and I close. See, now if I go to google.com, okay, let's see what's happening. Oh, I know what happened. Remember how we changed the DNS? So DNS has to be working. That's one of the requirements. And so via etc hosts, yeah, here's my overrides for hosts. Let's close that, and let's go back and refresh. And so I have Google. But at the same time, notice that I can go to my log files, and all my requests are being logged in the access log file. Okay, access log file. More than that, and for this I'm going to enable just a display of the log file. I configured my proxy by specifying local host because my browser is on the same system where the proxy is running. Okay. As long as I know my IP address, and let's see, my IP address is right here. Let me just check settings here on my virtual machine. Okay, I'm going to change that to be bridged. Okay, thank you. It'll reconnect. And the difference is that the NAT connectivity means I am connected between the virtual machine and the host operating system. But I'm using the host operating system as a network proxy, not just a HTTP proxy, but a network proxy. So I'm sort of masquerading my traffic through it, which means that my local network knows nothing of my virtual machine. But now I have another IP address given to me, which is on the same network as, in fact, your browsers. So what I will do is I will go ahead and configure this address on my Windows system. I'll go to Settings, and I'll say go to 172.22.204.128 on port 8080 for your proxy information. Say OK, OK. And now let's bring back the log file. And so now if I, now if I go to a new page, say google.com, see what's happening is my Windows host operating system is making requests to my virtual machine, and my virtual machine is going out to the internet to grab the HTTP traffic, brings it back, hands it over to my Windows system, right? And so just as I am logged in here, okay, just as I'm logged in through the, I'm sorry, just as I'm logged in through the browser, I'm using the traffic from a virtual machine. So here's how it looks like. If I was to go to what is my IP? Okay, my IP to the external world is 74.116.154.204. That's not the IP that I figured out here. And the reason why is because the college actually uses another forward proxy. Okay, it's using a firewall to proxy our traffic to the outside world. If I was to look at a local system that checks IP addresses, okay, my address right now appears to be 204.128, which is the IP address given to my virtual machine. Now let's disable the proxy, no proxy, and let's refresh. And so the IP has changed, right? Because with the proxy, I'm going through the virtual machine. Without the proxy, I'm going directly to it. And so the idea is that if you are going through the proxy, then you can have more control. You can have more control over what websites are viewed. You can, in addition, you can do something called caching. All right. So here's the great thing, and for that you actually have to have mod cache. Mod proxy used to be together with mod cache. Now they're two different modules. But mod cache allows you to store, for example, the Google welcome image. Okay, let's see, here's our Google image. Chances are that this image is not going to change more than maybe once a day. So the entire organization is going to go to Google sometime. So why not have them all go through a proxy, and the first guy who says google.com will download this image onto our proxy system that's local. And the next guy that says google.com is going to receive that image delivered to their browser instead of us going out again to the internet and grabbing the image again. And that's the idea of caching. Caching takes place at all levels of web applications. You start with your browser. The browser is smart enough to cache all of these images already, and it's not going to request it until there's some kind of a timeout that it decides upon. If it's an SSL website, then it will not cache at all. Okay, that's the idea that in SSL websites, we don't do very much caching. So there's cache at the browser level, then there's cache at the proxy level, and then the actual web application that you are using oftentimes will cache on their end as well, so that way they don't have to go to the database every time you ask for a page to be put together. Okay, but the idea is that organizations should see, if I refresh this page, you can see that going through. The idea is that the organization can save a lot of bandwidth and make it appear as if the internet is very fast if they can do caching through an intermediate point like this. So that's forward proxy. Any questions about a forward proxy?
Yes.
Please.
Cookies? How are cookies and caching different?
Okay, so cookies are small files which are communicated inside of the HTTP header, and these files are stored on the browser for the needs of identification. Different functions. So cookies are to help us to log into a website and that website to be able to recognize us back. Whereas caching is to speed things up. It means that you don't have to be logged into the website at all. But when you see an image or a JavaScript or a CSS file, we will download it and keep it on our local network. The connectivity between us and the proxy server will be at least 10 megabits per second or higher. Okay? The connectivity between us and the internet or Google itself is going to be much smaller, slower than that.
I thought cookies were the benefit to the user was that they got back to the site quickly.
It has nothing to do with speed. The cookie would identify us as the browser, and if you
The benefit to the user for cookies.
because without the cookie you could not log in to most websites.
So it's just about logging.
It's about login, but it's also about tracking your preferences. So a cookie can have stored, okay, I prefer white background with black text. And in that sense, it allows you some speed increase because then you don't have to redo those preferences. But it has, the cookies don't speed up the internet in any way, okay? Caching will because we can put the content on the local server closer to us, and therefore we don't make as many trips over the slow media. So imagine that you have dial-up at home, and you have 10 different computers attached to it. The websites that are already cached locally will appear very quickly on those systems, whereas every time you have to make a trip over the dial-up, that's going to take a longer time.
There's virtually very little cookies benefit to the user.
For performance needs, yes, but users need cookies that are necessary in order for the applications like Amazon or eBay or any other one to be able to identify you back and therefore keep you logged in. As you go from one page to the other, the web server does not know anything about you. So the only way they know is when they leave a cookie on your browser, and then when you make a request for the next page, you actually are sending the cookie back to them. So in the header of the request, HTTP request, the line that includes your cookie is going to be sent back. And every time there's back and forth when those cookies are included with the whole conversation. But it doesn't necessarily mean speeding up for the end user. Now, applications may remember things about you thanks to the cookies, which again does not make it necessary for you to re-log in. So from that perspective, a user would see this as a time savings. Yeah. Okay, so let's look again at the config here. I think it was right here. So the config would be, right, very straightforward. Once the proxy is installed, there are only 2 lines of config. Okay, perfect. But port 8080 came from the listen directive, right? So you can choose whatever port for the proxy to be listening on. Then the proxy connects out via port 80 to whatever website you specified. So the proxy has the ability of rewriting the header and then sending it back to you as if it was the server itself. Okay, that's forward proxy. Reverse proxy solves a different need, a different situation. Whereas the forward proxy is used to benefit the users to create a controlled environment, reverse proxy is there to provide load balancing. So now we are the IT department that hosts Google. And we notice that our server goes down maybe twice a day, which isn't good, because when it's down, then we lose customers. Yahoo starts getting hits. So what we chose to do is we want to have 3 web servers at our location, and when someone types in google.com, we want them to go to the proxy. The proxy should choose which server is up, which server it should contact, and serve information back to the end user from an existing well-working server. So reverse proxy is sort of man in the middle, okay, but it no longer is there for logging or for controlling access. It's there to allow intermediary layer so that we can hide our servers behind it. Okay, so reverse proxy. Okay, the configuration of that is also straightforward. Basically, what we have to do is we have to change the current config where we say proxy requests, and we'll say off. So we're turning off the forward proxy. Then we're going to say proxy pass. Whenever a web browser hits our server, we can specify what URL points where. Most of the time, okay, a proxy will serve only one system. So I can say the root. When someone goes to the root or any website after that, do this function. And so the function is, and I'm going to pick on Google, so we'll say go ahead and go to Google, HTTP, go to google.com, like this. Okay, and then we'll say proxy pass reverse. Now those 2 directives are very close together. The difference is that the bottom one, proxy pass reverse, in addition to sending the information from the end user to the correct server, it's also going to rewrite the header as it comes back from the remote server. So if there are links on the page, they will point to our server instead of Google that's out there. Okay, so we're just going to do a little bit of rewriting. And there is a module in Apache called mod rewrite that can do all kinds of magic with rewriting URLs. So we'll say, go ahead and do that to google.com. Okay, with this in place, okay, we are ready to restart. And when we do that, if I go back to my system, and let's see if I still have my proxy enabled. Okay, proxy is still enabled. And if I go to a website, maybe yahoo.com, okay, it doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't work because my forward proxy is no longer working. Right? I reconfigured it. But instead, I can now go and turn off my my proxy, no proxy. And instead, I can plug in this IP address of my server, okay, and, oh, I see, port 8080, right? That's what we did. And now, my website looks like Google. See, what I did is I created a reverse proxy. Google is my server. Whenever you talk to me behind the scenes, I get all my information from Google and then display to you as if I was doing that, okay? And so then, depending on how this is done here, because these are different, at the top, these are different hosts, the rewrite doesn't work. But let's see if there's a, right here. See, under the privacy note, it rewrote the host information as well. So when I click on it, it'll actually go to my server again. And so in the URL, you can see that as if it was coming from me. Right. So two different scenarios, both involve some kind of a man-in-the-middle activity. But this would be done for the needs of load balancing, because now, you see, with the proxy server, I can specify, and there is actually there is a specific load balance module. So if you're still wondering what module to pick for your presentation, consider the load balancer module. And in this instance, we have a server that basically is going to send information forward to the server and then bring it back. But it itself acts just like a server, like a web server. So now if I was to do a tail on the access log file, let me refresh this. You can see that these are relative hits, right? So they look like hits to my local website. Only everything, I mean, none of these files exist on the actual local host. All of that has been borrowed from some other web server. Okay, so yeah, so the key point is that there's no additional configuration on the end servers. So the end servers can be applications that you purchased, or you're operating Blackboard or something else. You don't have to configure those at all. You just configure the proxy, and then the systems can hit the proxy. And so that would work the same way from my Iceweasel. If I go in to disconnect my forward proxy under settings, no proxy, okay. Right? I have Google under google.com because this browser is working with no proxy. But also, if I was to connect to localhost port 8080, and of course I have to refresh. All right, let's see why Iceweasel is not liking this. Okay, options and disable. Thank you. Okay, and so Google comes up, and it looks like you put together the whole web page because your URL would actually appear here. All right, any questions? All right, so if you want to read up on the proxies, in the PDF files there that we listed, they're great tools. Most of the time, once you configure one, you're not going to see it for a long time, right? So it's sort of technology that you put in place. It doesn't require very much hand-holding. Different uses. But today, you see, load balancing is a huge deal. It really is. Not just for the needs of performance, although performance is very important, but for disaster recovery. You know, since Katrina disaster, IT went crazy with DR. You know, we do all kinds of database work in order to replicate requests to multiple locations. At the web server level, we want to have one server in this building and another server a mile away. And then we want all of those to sort of work together. And so that can be done in multiple ways, but proxy is one of the ways that it can be accomplished. All right, well, great deal. Let's go ahead and turn towards the lab. And in the lab today, you're going to recompile the system. So you can't reuse the previous system because you have to recompile it with the enable proxy directive, or the parameter here for our configure script. And then you're going to first configure the forward proxy. I'm sorry, you're going to first configure the reverse proxy. You can choose whatever website you want. Okay, I'm using Google, but you can choose whatever website you want. And then the second one is going to be forward proxy, and make sure that if you are configuring this in the browser, okay, that you do test the access log file, because the browser should act no differently with the proxy or without the proxy. When you use the proxy, you should see new requests in the log file. That's how you know that you're using it. All right. Say it again, please.
Have you uploaded that?
No. So I uploaded it, but I have not enabled it yet.